The candlelight flickers softly against the worn parchment, casting long shadows that dance like restless spirits across the ancient text. A lone scholar, their fingers tracing the faded ink of 1,000-year-old saga, leans closer, their voice barely above a whisper, as they begin to unravel the secrets of Norse mythology's most fearsome creatures. Can you hear it? The crackle of the fire, the faint rustle of pages turning, the weight of legends waiting to be rediscovered. Tonight, we step into that quiet, hallowed space, where the line between myth and memory blurs, and the beasts of the Viking world stir from their slumber. We'd love to know where you're listening from, what corner of the world your own journey into rest begins. Let us know in the comments below, and tell us, does the night feel alive with stories where you are? There's something timeless about these tales, isn't there? They linger in the back of your mind like half-remembered dreams. The growl of Fenrir, the serpent's coils of Jörmungandr, the haunting glow of the Draugr's eyes. These aren't just monsters, they're echoes of a world where the wind carried warnings, where every shadow held a lesson, and where the gods themselves walked a razor's edge between creation and chaos. The Norse didn't just fear their beasts, they revered them, wove them into the very fabric of their understanding of life, death, and the forces beyond human control. And tonight, we'll walk that path together, one creature at a time, as the scholar's voice guides us deeper into the twilight of legend. So settle in, let the weight of the day slip away, and imagine yourself in that candlelit chamber, where every whispered word pulls you further into the realm of the Vikings' most terrifying and awe-inspiring beings. This isn't just a catalog of monsters, it's an invitation to feel the chill of the northern winds, to hear the creak of longboats cutting through icy waters, and to stand at the edge of a world where myth and reality collide. The parchment is unrolled, the ink glistens in the dim light, and the first beast stirs in the darkness, ready to meet you. Shall we begin? The scholar's quill trembles slightly as they trace the runes that speak of Fenrir, the great wolf born of trickster blood and destined to bring about the twilight of the gods. Picture him not just a beast, but a force of nature, his fur black as the void between stars, his eyes burning with a hunger no chain could ever restrain. The gods themselves, mighty as they were, knew fear when they looked upon him. They tried to bind him once, twice, with chains named lading and dromi, forged by the dwarves' cunning hands. But Fenrir merely laughed, shaking off their feeble restraints like a hound shedding water. And then came Gleipnir, a ribbon so thin, it seemed no stronger than a spider's silk, yet woven from impossible things, the sound of a cat's footsteps, the roots of a mountain, the breath of a fish. Even then, Fenrir sensed the trick. He would only allow it if one of the gods placed a hand in his jaws as a pledge of good faith. Tyr, the bravest of them all, stepped forward. The wolf's teeth closed, the binding held, and Tyr's sacrifice echoed through the halls of Asgard, a grim reminder that some destinies cannot be escaped. But the worst was yet to come. The scholar's voice drops lower now, as if afraid the wolf might hear, for the prophecies tell of Ragnarök, when Fenrir will break free at last, his howl splitting the sky asunder. His jaws, wide enough to swallow the sun, will drip with the blood of gods, and the world will drown in shadow. Can you hear it? That distant, haunting growl, creeping into the edges of your thoughts. It's the sound of inevitability, the whisper of a fate even the divine could not outrun. Yet here's the chilling truth. The Norse didn't tell this tale to frighten children. They told it to teach courage, to show that even in the face of certain doom, one could meet their fate with eyes wide open. Fenrir isn't just a monster. He's the storm on the horizon, the crisis we cannot avoid, the shadow that makes the light matter. And as the firelight flickers, casting wolf-shaped shadows on the walls, you realize this story isn't just about them, it's about us. What chains are we testing? What sacrifices would we make? And when our own Ragnarök comes, will we face it with tears resolve, or will we flinch? The parchment rustles as the scholar turns the page, but the weight of Fenrir's legend lingers, heavy as the silence between heartbeats. Some stories don't end when the telling does. They curl around your bones like winter's breath, and you carry them with you long after the fire burns low. The scholar's breath catches as the quill moves to the next set of runes, their ink pooling like dark water on the page. Here lies Jörmungandr, the world serpent, not merely a creature, but the very circle of existence itself, coiled around Midgard with such immensity that its tail rests between its teeth, an Ouroboros of dread and wonder. Can you feel it? The way the air grows thick, heavy with salt and the electric tang of storms, as if the sea itself is holding its breath. The serpent's scales, glinting like shards of poisoned ice, shift restlessly beneath the waves, and somewhere in the depths, its heartbeat thrums in time with the tides. The gods knew the danger of Loki's offspring. They cast Jörmungandr into the ocean, thinking the abyss would swallow the beast whole. But the sea is vast, and the serpent grew mile by mile, century by century, until its body wrapped around the world like a noose. The Norse saw its shape in the whirlpools that dragged ships under, in the tidal waves that erased shorelines, in the earthquakes that split the earth. This was no mindless monster. It was a living cataclysm, a reminder that the world is fragile, balanced on the edge of a serpent's fang. And then there's Thor. Oh, the thunder god's hatred for Jörmungandr burns like lightning in his veins. The scholar's voice warms with the tale of their fated duel, how Thor once disguised himself as a youth to fish for the serpent, baiting his hook with the head of an ox, how the line went taut, how the waters churned as the beast erupted from the depths, its eyes like drowned moons, its venom dripping into the sea like liquid fire. The gods trembled as Thor raised his hammer, ready to strike, until the giant Hymir, terrified, severed the line, and the serpent sank back into the abyss, leaving only ripples and rage behind. But the story doesn't end there. The parchment trembles as the scholar traces the prophecy of Ragnarök, when Jörmungandr will rise for the last time, its body writhing free of the ocean, its venom staining the sky. Thor will meet it in final battle, slaying the beast, only to stagger 9 steps and fall, drowned in the serpent's poison. There's a terrible poetry to it. The god of storms and the world serpent, locked in a dance of mutual destruction, neither able to exist without the other. The Norse didn't fear the serpent because it was evil. They feared it because it was necessary. The shadow that gave meaning to the light, the chaos that made order precious. Listen closely now. Can you hear it? The distant hiss of scales against the ocean floor, the slow, inevitable tightening of the coil. Jörmungandr isn't just a myth. It's the whisper in the back of your mind, when the ground shakes, when the waves rise higher than they should, when the world feels too vast and too small all at once. The serpent is the boundary between what we know and what we cannot control, and its lesson is clear. Some forces are too great to conquer, only to endure. The scholar's hand stills, the quill hovering above the page, as if afraid to wake what sleeps beneath the ink. Some stories are best told in whispers, lest the telling stirs something best left undisturbed. But the serpent hears anyway. It always does. The scholar's fingers pause over the parchment, tracing the jagged runes that spell Nidhogg's name, a whisper of ink that feels more like a warning. Somewhere far below, in the tangled roots of Yggdrasil, the great ash tree that binds the 9 worlds, the dragon stirs, not with the thunder of wings or the roar of fire, but with the slow, relentless scrape of teeth against bark, a sound like bones grinding in the dark. Can you hear it? That faint, insistent gnawing, seeping up through the soil, through stone, through the very foundations of myth. Nidhogg isn't like the other beasts. Where Fenrir howls and Jörmungandr coils, Nidhogg works in silence, patient as decay. Its name means malice striker, and it lives down in the icy mists of Niflheim, where the dead wander and the air tastes of rust. The dragon's purpose is simple, terrible, to gnaw at Yggdrasil's roots, siphon its sap like poison, and wait. For what? For the day the great tree trembles, for the moment the worlds above grow weak, for the final unraveling of all things. The Norse didn't fear Nidhogg because it would attack them. They feared it because it never stops. While gods war and heroes fall, the dragon's jaws keep moving, a reminder that even eternity has an end. And yet, here's the thing that chills the scholar's blood. Nidhogg isn't alone down there. The runes speak of other serpents, countless as roots themselves, all chewing, all waiting. But worse still are the corpses. The dragon feasts on the dead, the oath breakers and murderers cast into Nastrand, the shore of corpses. Their flesh is its reward, their screams its lullaby. The scholar's voice falters as they describe the way Nidhogg's venom pools in the underworld, a black mirror that reflects nothing but the faces of those who have earned its hunger. But why? Why tell such a grim tale? Because the Norse understood something vital. A world without shadows is a world without stakes. Nidhogg isn't just destruction, it's consequence. Every lie, every betrayal, every broken oath feeds it, and every bite it takes is a warning. The roots that hold the cosmos together are only as strong as the honor of those who dwell among its branches. The dragon is the price of chaos, the tax on cruelty, and its ceaseless hunger is what makes virtue matter. The fire sputters suddenly, as if a draft has slipped into the chamber. The scholar shivers, pulling their cloak tighter. Some say Nidhogg can hear its name spoken, even across the vast gulf between worlds. And now, in the quiet that follows the tale, you can't help but wonder, was that just the wind rattling the shutters, or the sound of scales shifting in the dark? The parchment offers no answers, only the knowledge that somewhere, deep below, the gnawing continues, and it always will. The scholar's quill hesitates, then dances across the page with unexpected lightness as they sketch the shape of Ratatoskr, the squirrel whose tiny claws scurry endlessly up and down Yggdrasil's trunk. Where Fenrir and Nidhogg inspire dread, Ratatoskr brings chaos of a different kind. Picture him, russet fur fluffed with self-importance, beady eyes glittering with glee as he darts between the roots and branches, a messenger with mischief in his heart. His mission, To fairy words, not noble decrees or wise counsel, but the bitter, biting insults traded between the eagle, perched at the tree's highest bough, and the serpent, coiled deep below. At first glance, it seems almost comical, a cosmic game of telephone played out by creatures who should know better. The eagle shrieks a taunt about the serpent's stench. Ratatoskr delivers it with theatrical flourish, adding a sneer of his own. The serpent hisses back a jab about the eagle's arrogance. The squirrel races upward, embellishing the insult like a bard polishing a verse. Back and forth, up and down, the squirrel runs, stitching the worlds together with threads of spite. The scholar chuckles softly, but then the quill stills, because here's the truth the Norse understood. Chaos doesn't always roar. Sometimes it wears the guise of something small, something laughable until it isn't. Think of a spark in dry tinder, a single word whispered at the wrong moment. Ratatoskr isn't just a prankster. He's the embodiment of how tiny provocations, left unchecked, can unravel the mightiest bonds. The eagle and serpent might never have clashed directly, if not for the squirrel's eager tongue. And Yggdrasil, the great tree that holds the cosmos together, trembles not just from Nidhogg's gnawing below, but from the venomous words rattling its branches above. The Norse didn't fear Ratatoskr because he was powerful. They feared him because he was persistent. There's a lesson here, isn't there? One that hums beneath the laughter. We've all known a Ratatoskr, the coworker who stirs the pot with gossip, the friend who can't resist passing along drama, even the voice in our own heads that magnifies every slight. The squirrel reminds us that discord doesn't need a dragon's fangs to be destructive. Sometimes, all it takes is a creature too small to notice until the damage is done. The scholar's fingers tap the parchment thoughtfully. Perhaps that's why Ratatoskr endures in these tales, not as a villain, but as a mirror. His mischief is too human to dismiss, too familiar to condemn. And as the firelight flickers, casting squirrel-shaped shadows that leap across the walls, you realize the greatest monsters aren't always the ones that lurk in the dark. Sometimes they're the ones we carry with us, chattering in our ears, urging us to pass along the poison. The scholar's hand trembles as they turn the page to reveal the runes etched in faded crimson, a stain too dark to be mere ink. Here lies Garmr, the hound of hell, whose howl is not a warning but a sentence. Picture him, a beast as massive as Fenrir, yet bound not by chains but by purpose, his fur matted with the blood of the dishonored dead, his eyes glowing like embers in the gloom of Nidhogg, the cave that yawns before Hell's Gate. The air grows thick with the scent of iron and damp earth, and somewhere in the distance, a low growl reverberates through the bones of the world, a sound that doesn't just fill the silence, it devours it. This is no ordinary guardian. While Cerberus of Greek myth merely bars passage, Garmr does something far worse. He knows. The Norse believed the hound could scent the weight of a soul's deeds, tasting the lies, the cowardice, the oaths left to rot. His howl isn't just noise, it's an accusation, a dirge for those who have earned their place in hell's cold halls. The scholar's voice drops to a whisper as they recount the prophecy of Ragnarök, when Garmr will finally break free, his jaws slick with the blood of Tyr, the god who once sacrificed a hand to bind Fenrir. There's a cruel symmetry to it, the guardian and the guarded, the judge and the judged, locked in a dance of mutual annihilation. But here's what chills the spine. Garmr isn't just a monster waiting at the end of all things. He's a mirror. The Norse didn't fear him because he was savage. They feared him because he was just. His growl is the voice of consequence, the sound of every broken promise, circling back to bite the hand that made it. When travelers spoke of hearing distant barks in the night, it wasn't just superstition. It was a reminder that the road to hell is paved with choices, and the hound is always listening. The fire gutters suddenly, plunging the chamber into near darkness. The scholar's breath fogs in the sudden cold as they lean closer, their words barely audible. Some say Garmr's howl doesn't just echo through hell. It seeps into the dreams of the living, a subconscious whisper urging them to ask, "What debt have I left unpaid?" The question lingers, heavy as the silence between heartbeats, because the truth is, we've all heard that growl, maybe not with our ears, but in the pit of the stomach when we've wronged someone, in the sleepless nights, when regret gnaws at the edges of our thoughts. Garmr isn't just a beast of myth. He's the shadow that walks beside us, waiting for the moment we turn to meet his gaze. The parchment crackles as the scholar rolls it tighter, as if to muffle the hound's voice. But some sounds can't be silenced. They settle in the marrow, in the quiet spaces between words, in the knowledge that every gate has its guardian, and every guardian remembers. The scholar's voice cracks like dry parchment as they unroll the tale of Fafnir, a story that begins not with scales or fire, but with a dwarf's outstretched hand, trembling over a cursed hoard. Imagine it, the glitter of stolen gold reflected in eyes that once knew kinship, now narrowed to slits of suspicion. This isn't just a dragon's origin. It's a slow unraveling, a soul twisted tighter and tighter by greed until it snaps into something monstrous. The rasp of coins sliding over one another fills the silence, a sound like bones settling in a grave. Listen closely. You can almost hear the moment it happens. The creak of sinew stretching, the sickening pop of joints rearranging, the way Fafnir's breath turns thick and sulfuric as his body rebels against itself. His brother Ridgein watches in horror as flesh hardens into emerald scales, as fingers curl into talons, as the dwarf who once shared his forge becomes a creature that sees even family as a thief. The curse doesn't just transform Fafnir, it weaponizes his fear. Soon, he's coiled atop his treasure like a living vault, venom dripping from his jaws, hissing at shadows. Gold is no longer wealth to him. It's armor, it's proof. It's the only thing left that can't betray him. And yet here's the tragedy that makes the scholar's quill shake. Fafnir's hoard was never truly his. The gold belonged to a god, paid as blood money for a murder. Every coin is stamped with guilt, every gem etched with the name of a victim. The dragon doesn't guard treasure. He guards a crime scene. The Norse knew this better than anyone. Greed isn't just desire gone wrong. It's memory turned septic. Fafnir doesn't growl because he's possessive. He growls because deep down, beneath the layers of scales and spite, he still remembers what he lost to get here. The fire dims as the scholar recounts the final act. The hero Sigurd, guided by Ridgein's vengeance, digging a pit to stab the dragon from below. But the lesson isn't in the killing. It's in Fafnir's dying words, a rasping warning. The gold will burn you too, and it does. Sigurd tastes the dragon's blood and gains the gift of prophecy, only to foresee his own betrayal by the very brother who sent him on this quest. The curse slithers on, serpentine, finding new hosts. That's the true horror of Fafnir's tale. Not the claws or the flames, but the way greed lingers like a stain, passed from hand to hand. The scholar's fingers brush the edge of the parchment, where the ink bleeds into the shape of a dragon's wing. Some transformations can't be undone. Some choices leave you forever crouched over your hoard, listening for the footsteps of the next thief, or the next version of yourself. The scholar's candle gutters suddenly, as if the very air recoils from the name now whispered across the parchment. Kraken, not a beast, not a monster, but a living tempest. A leviathan so vast its body could be mistaken for an island rising from the depths. The ink swirls like black water as the quill traces its form, tentacles thicker than ship masts, studded with suckers that leave craters in hulls, eyes that glow like drowned lanterns in the abyss. Listen, can you hear it? The creak of a long ship's timbers straining against the waves, the panicked shouts of sailors as the water beneath them moves, as the surface bulges like a breath, held too long, then erupts. This isn't just a creature, it's the sea's wrath made flesh. The Norse didn't spin tales of the Kraken to frighten children. They spoke of it in the hushed tones of men who'd seen entire fleets vanish without a splinter left behind. Some said its ink darkened the ocean for leagues, a smokescreen for the slaughter to come. Others claimed its mere presence stirred whirlpools, as if the sea itself bowed to its will. But the most chilling accounts, those came from survivors who swore the Kraken didn't attack. It unmade. Ships weren't dragged under. They were peeled apart, plank by plank, as if the beast sought not to feed, but to erase. And yet, there's a terrible beauty to it. The scholar's voice softens as they describe the way the Kraken's tentacles might gleam under the midnight sun, iridescent as oil on water, how its movements could be mistaken for the slow, graceful undulations of seaweed until the strike. The Norse understood this duality. The sea was their road, their provider, their god, but it was also their grave. The Kraken embodied that contradiction, a reminder that the same forces that sustain you can swallow you whole without a ripple. The firelight dims as the scholar leans closer, their words barely audible over the imagined crash of waves. Here's the truth that lingers like salt on the tongue. The Kraken wasn't just a predator. It was a boundary. Sail too far, test the gods too boldly, and you'd find it waiting in the blind spot between courage and hubris. The Norse didn't map the edges of the world because they feared the unknown. They did it knowing the Kraken was out there, and daring to sail past it anyway. A sudden gust rattles the shutters. The scholar's hand flies to the parchment, as if to keep it from being pulled into some unseen current. Some stories don't end when the telling does. They coil around you, silent as the depths, and long after the candle burns low, you'll find yourself listening for the sound of something vast moving beneath the waves. Waiting, always waiting. The scholar's breath stills as they trace the runes describing the Valkyries' mounts. Creatures not of flesh and bone, but of storm cloud and starlight, their hooves striking the air like distant thunder. These are no ordinary steeds. Their manes ripple with the aurora's glow, their eyes reflecting battles yet to come, their very presence thinning the veil between worlds. Listen closely, that faint drumming beneath your ribs, it's not your heartbeat, it's the echo of their gallop, a rhythm older than time, calling the worthy dead to Odin's hall. Picture them, a dozen spectral mares descending onto a battlefield at dusk, their riders the Valkyries silent as shadow. The dying warriors see them first as a shimmer in the air, then as a cascade of silvered hooves that never quite touch the earth. There's no bridle, no saddle, no bit between teeth. The horses choose their path, weaving between the slain with an otherworldly precision, pausing only for those whose courage blazed brightest. The scholar's voice drops to a whisper as they recount the old belief. To hear the Valkyries' steeds is to hear your own fate whispered back to you. But here's the truth that chills the spine. These horses aren't merely transports. They're judges. Their nostrils flare at the scent of cowardice. They sidestep the unworthy as if repelled by some invisible tide. The Norse didn't just revere them for their beauty. They feared them for their discernment. A warrior might lie to his fellows, to his gods, even to himself, but the Valkyries' steeds know. Their very gait is a verdict, their silent scrutiny more terrifying than any blade. And then there's the aftermath. The scholar's quill hesitates over a particularly vivid passage, the moment a chosen soul is lifted onto the horse's back. Not climbed, not mounted, but gathered, like a harvest of honor. The steed's body is cold as moonlight, yet the warrior feels no fear, only a peace deeper than sleep. As they ascend, the horse's breath mists with the souls of ancestors, its hooves painting the sky with streaks of silver, a path visible only to those about to cross it. The fire crackles, pulling the scholar back. They tap the parchment thoughtfully. These horses aren't just part of the myth. They're the embodiment of a brutal, beautiful truth. In Norse belief, death wasn't an end, but a threshold, and the creatures who carried you across didn't offer comfort. They offered purpose. Every hoofbeat was a reminder. Valhalla wasn't a reward. It was a mustering ground. The final war was always coming, and even the glorious dead had work to do. A sudden gust rattles the chamber, scattering embers. The scholar glances up, as if expecting to see ghostly flanks shimmering in the dark. But there's only the night, and the lingering sense that something vast just passed by, too swift for mortal eyes to catch. The scholar's fingers press harder into the parchment as they reach the runes that speak of trolls, not the small, mischievous creatures of later tales, but hulking behemoths, whose very breath smells of wet stone and rotting roots. Imagine standing at the foot of a mountain as dusk settles, the wind carrying a sound like boulders grinding together deep within the earth. That's no avalanche. It's laughter, troll laughter, the kind that vibrates through your boots and up your spine, a reminder that some things were never meant to walk beneath the sun. These aren't just giants, they're the land itself turned vengeful. Their skin isn't merely tough, it's literal stone, moss-crusted and fissured, cracking like dried mud when they move. Sunlight turns them to statues, yes, but don't mistake that for weakness. The Norse knew better. A troll caught by dawn doesn't die. It waits, and stone has patience. Wander too close to a harmless rock formation at twilight, and you might notice too late how its shadow doesn't quite match the shape of the cliffs around it. The scholar's voice drops to a murmur as they recount the warnings carved into old homesteaders' doors. Never answer a voice calling your name from the hills after dark. Trolls don't just hunt, they mimic. A lost child's sob, a lover's pleading whisper, even the exact cadence of your own mother's voice. All traps to lure the unwary into the grasping hands of something that hasn't tasted fresh meat in centuries. And if you're foolish enough to follow, that's when you'll hear the real sound of a troll's hunger. Not a roar, but a wet, rhythmic clicking, like pebbles rattling in a throat, as it counts the steps between you and the safety of your fire. Yet here's the twist that makes the scholar's quill tremble. Trolls weren't always monsters. Some sagas whisper they were here before the gods, before humans, before even Yggdrasil's roots took hold. They're the old bones of the world, resentful of sunlight and song, and all things that grew above their mountains while they slept. That's why they smash bridges, topple churches, and hurl boulders at farmsteads, not because they're cruel, but because they remember when the land belonged to no one, and they mean to take it back. The firelight gutters again as a draft slithers through the chamber. The scholar wraps their cloak tighter, eyes darting to the shadows pooling in the corners. Because everyone knows the worst part of troll lore. They don't just live in mountains. They live in the spaces between stories, in the gaps of what we think we know. That creak in your attic, the way your cellar smells suddenly of damp granite. The Norse would have recognized those signs. They'd have placed a piece of cold iron on the threshold and whispered a prayer not to the gods, but to the trolls. An offering, a truce, a plea to be forgotten, just for one more night. The parchment crackles as the scholar rolls it tighter, but the silence that follows feels less like an ending and more like a held breath. Some tales don't need to say, beware. They slink into your thoughts like a draft under the door, and suddenly, every shadow looks a little too solid, every distant rumble a little too deliberate. The trolls are listening. They've always been listening, and stone, after all, has very good ears. The scholar's breath fogs in the sudden cold as they unroll the passage about the Draugr, those restless dead who refuse to relinquish their grip on the mortal world. Picture a burial mound at midnight, the earth unnaturally still, not even a whisper of wind to disturb the thick mist coiling around its base. That silence is the first warning. The second is the smell, not decay, but wet iron and stale sweat, the stench of armor worn too long in battle, and then movement. A hand, blackened as if burned from within, reaches the soil with a sound like cracking ice. These aren't mere zombies. The Draugr are something far worse, corpses swollen with supernatural strength, their bodies heavy with the weight of curses and gold. The Norse believe they didn't just guard treasure, they were the treasure, their flesh fused with the rings and arm bands they'd hoarded in life. Some sagas claim their skin glistens like polished amber, from the gold melted into their very bones. But it's their eyes that freeze the blood, empty sockets that somehow still see, glowing faintly with a light that isn't reflection, but memory. The Draugr remember. They remember who buried them. They remember who wronged them. And most of all, they remember every greedy fool who's ever tried to steal from their graves. The scholar's quill scratches feverishly as they recount the tale of Thorolf, a Draugr so powerful he could crush men like grapes in his grip. When his mound was opened, the invaders found him seated on a throne of rusted weapons, his beard grown through the cracks in his own breastplate, his laughter shaking dust from the rafters. He didn't just kill the grave robbers, he played with them, tossing one into the sea, burying another alive, saving the last for a game of tug of war that ended with a spine ripped clean from its owner's body. The Draugr don't hunger for flesh. They hunger for vengeance, for the satisfaction of proving that death isn't an escape from their wrath. Yet here's the detail that makes the scholar's candle flicker. The Draugr aren't mindless. They're cunning. They shape-shift into mist to slip through keyholes, summon storms to sink ships, carrying their stolen goods, even curse entire bloodlines with nightmares that drive men to madness. In one saga, a Draugr doesn't touch his victim at all. He simply sits at the foot of the man's bed every night, dripping seawater onto the floor, until the weight of his gaze alone snaps the man's mind like a dry twig. The Norse didn't fear the Draugr because they were dead. They feared them because they were right. These creatures were the embodiment of a culture's darkest truth. Some grudges outlast breath, some hungers outlast heartbeat, and no mound is deep enough to bury a soul that refuses to let go. The scholar's fingers tremble as they smooth the parchment flat, their voice dropping to a whisper. Even now, in the quiet of the chamber, you can almost hear it, the faint, wet sound of something clawing its way up through damp earth, inch by inch, patient as the turning of the stars. The Draugr aren't coming, they're already here, and they never left. The scholar's fingers trace the edge of the parchment, where the ink bleeds into the shape of an unnatural coastline, a jagged silhouette that doesn't match any map. Half-Gufa doesn't reveal itself with roars or splashes. It invites. Imagine you're a weary sailor, salt-crusted and half-mad with thirst. When the cry goes up, land. There, just beyond the fog, a dark mass rises from the waves, its edges dotted with what might be trees, or perhaps only the suggestion of them. The water around it is strangely calm, a glassy oasis in the churning sea. You drop anchor, stagger onto the shore, or what feels like shore, only for the ground to shudder beneath your boots. That's when you smell it, the reek of rotting fish and sulfur, thick enough to coat your tongue. And the trees, those aren't trees. The Norse knew Half-Gufa as the Kraken's quieter, crueler cousin. Where the Kraken destroys in a frenzy of tentacles and teeth, Half-Gufa waits. Its body mimics the very geography sailors pray to find. A cove, a sandbar, even the warm shallows of a lagoon. The moment prey steps onto its back, the monster exhales. The water rushes in, the island sinks, and the maw, a yawning chasm large enough to swallow 3 longships side by side, opens beneath the waves. Survivors. There are none, only the sea's terrible silence afterward, and the occasional piece of flotsam bobbing to the surface. A snapped oar, a waterlogged boot, a half-melted candle still clutched in a skeletal hand. Yet here's the chilling genius of Half-Gufa's deception. The scholar's voice drops to a whisper as they recount the old whaler's belief that the beast doesn't just mimic land, it learns. Early tales describe it as a bare rock. Later accounts speak of seaweed-strewn beaches, even the illusion of bird calls echoing from its spiny ridges. The more sailors it consumes, the more convincing its disguise becomes, as if it absorbs their memories of safe harbors and turns them into bait. The Norse didn't fear Half-Gufa because it was strong. They feared it because it was patient, a reminder that the sea's greatest dangers aren't the storms you see coming, but the ones that wear the face of salvation. A log shifts in the fire, sending up a shower of sparks. The scholar flinches, their eyes darting to the jug of water at their elbow. For a heartbeat, the surface doesn't ripple, just sits there, still as a predator holding its breath. Then the moment passes, but the question lingers, heavy as an anchor chain. How many of history's vanished ships didn't wreck at all? How many simply stepped onto the wrong shore? The parchment offers no comfort, only the knowledge that somewhere, Beneath the waves, Half-Gufa is always growing hungrier and cleverer, and the next island you see might not be an island at all. The scholar's quill hesitates mid-stroke as a distant screech cuts through the silence, a sound too vast, too ancient, to belong to any ordinary bird. High above the flickering candlelight, beyond the reach of mortal eyes, Hrisvelgr spreads his wings. Not the wings of an eagle as we know it, but something vaster, darker, edged with the same terrible grandeur as the cliffs at the end of the world. His name means corpse swallower, but he doesn't feast on flesh. He feasts on silence. Picture him perched at the northernmost rim of the cosmos, his talons curled around the icy spine of the world tree Yggdrasil. Every feather is a storm, waiting to happen, each one etched with the same runes that sailors carve into their ships' prows for protection. When he shifts his weight, continents feel the draft. When he stretches his wings, that's when the true magic begins. The Norse didn't believe the wind was mere air in motion. They knew it was the sigh of a primordial giant, the ripple of Hrisvelgr's pinions as he adjusted his grip on the edge of existence. The scholar's voice drops to a hush, as if afraid the eagle might overhear. There's an old Viking proverb: when the north wind bites, Hrisvelgr is hungry, not for food, but for change. His gales aren't random, they're omens. A sudden gust might scatter an invading fleet, sparing a village. A relentless squall could drive a lone fisherman straight to uncharted shores where gods walk in disguise. The Norse didn't fear the wind, they listened to it, because woven into every howl was a choice: resist and be broken, or bend and let it carry you where you needed to go. Yet here's the chilling truth: the scholar's fingers tremble to write. Hrisvelgr isn't just a force of nature, he's a jailer. Some say he perches at the boundary of Niflheim, the land of mist and the dead, his wings beating back the icy breath of the underworld to keep it from swallowing the realms of the living. His screech isn't just a sound, it's a ward, a spell woven into the very fabric of the sky to hold the darkness at bay. A gust rattles the shutters, making the candle flame gutter. The scholar glances up, their throat tight, because everyone who's ever stood alone on a windswept cliff knows the feeling, that eerie sense of being watched from above, of something vast and patient, noting your presence with the same indifference as a mountain regards an ant. The Norse didn't build altars to Hrisvelgr. They simply tied charms into their hair when sailing, whispering pleas into the gales, hoping the eagle might mistake their voices for the cry of his own feathers. The parchment curls at the edges as if touched by an unseen draft. Some creatures don't need to appear to be felt. They live in the space between breaths, in the pause before a storm, in the way the hairs on your neck rise when the wind dies suddenly, as if the world itself is holding its breath, waiting for the next beat of wings. The scholar's fingers linger over the illustration of Gullinbursti, tracing the gilded curves of its bristles, each one shimmering as if dipped in liquid sunlight. This is no ordinary boar, forged by the dwarven brothers Draugr and Sindri. Its golden hide doesn't just gleam, it pulses with the warmth of a harvest sunset, casting light so pure it banishes shadows for leagues. Farmers whispered that where Gullinbursti ran, crops sprouted overnight, their stalks heavy with grain. Warriors claimed its radiance could blind enemies mid-charge. Even the snow melted beneath its hooves, leaving trails of spring in its wake. But here's the secret hidden in the glow. Gullinbursti isn't merely a symbol of abundance. It's a paradox. Freyr, the god of fertility who rides the boar into battle, surrendered his sword to win his lover, a decision that would leave him defenseless at Ragnarök. The boar's light, then, isn't just a beacon, it's a warning. The Norse understood that brilliance often walks hand in hand with sacrifice, that even the most radiant gifts can cast the longest shadows. Listen closely to the old skaldic verses. They don't sing of Garmr's speed or strength, but of its silence, how it moves through forests without snapping a twig, how its breath steams in the cold like a smith's forge, quiet and relentless. There's a lesson in that hush. True power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it hums, steady as a heartbeat, luminous as a field of wheat under a midsummer moon. Yet the scholar's quill hesitates over the final rune, because prophecies like boars have tusks. On the last day, when Surtur's flames blacken the sky, Garmr will fall beside Freyr, its golden light swallowed by smoke. But the sagas insist, no light truly dies, it waits, in the charcoal of burnt fields, in the embers of pyres, in the first shy bud pushing through ash. The boar's glow was never meant to last forever, only to remind us that even the briefest light can ignite hope enough for 1,000 winters. The fire pops, scattering sparks across the parchment. For a heartbeat, they dance in the shape of a running boar, then vanish, but the afterimage lingers, seared into the dark behind your eyelids. Some lights are like that. Gone, but never forgotten. The scholar's words quicken as they tell of Skal and Hati, their names like twin echoes in the dark. One meaning treachery, the other hatred. These are no ordinary wolves. Their paws don't tread earth, but the cold, star-strewn paths of the sky itself. Their hunger so vast it could swallow the heavens whole. Picture them, sinew and shadow stretched taut across the cosmos, eyes burning with a light that doesn't illuminate but devours. Skal chases the sun, his jaws dripping with solar flares. Hati stalks the moon, his howl frosting its silver face with cracks. Every dawn, every dusk, the wolves gain just a little ground, their panting breaths shortening the days like a noose tightening around time itself. Listen. That faint tremor in the air when the sun dips below the horizon. It's not the wind. It's the sound of Skal's claws scraping against the edge of the world, close enough now that the heat of his breath makes the horizon ripple like a mirage. The Norse didn't just fear these beasts, they measured their lives by them. Farmers planting seeds would glance skyward, judging the wolves' proximity by how quickly the shadows lengthened. Sailors timed their voyages by the moon's scars, knowing Hati's teeth left deeper marks with each passing year. This wasn't superstition. It was astronomy written in fangs and fury, a celestial clock ticking down to Ragnarök. Yet here's what chills the spine. The wolves aren't evil. They're inevitable. The scholar's voice cracks as they recount the prophecy. That final, cataclysmic day, when Skal will at last seize the sun, plunging the world into darkness, while Hati shakes the moon loose like a fruit from a branch. The sky will bleed, the stars will gutter out, and in that endless night, the wolves will finally stop running only to realize they've devoured their own purpose. There's a terrible poetry to it. Creatures born to chase, doomed to succeed. But the Norse didn't tell this tale to spread despair. They told it to teach defiance. Every sunrise was a victory, every moonrise a rebellion. The wolves might be faster tomorrow, but today, The light still shines. The scholar's fingers tighten around the parchment as the firelight wanes, as if they half expect the room to plunge into blackness. Some truths are like that, too immense to face head-on, so we glimpse them sideways, in the way our hearts pound when twilight lingers too long, or how children instinctively reach for candles when the night feels hungrier than it should. The parchment rustles, but the silence that follows isn't empty. It thrums with the unspoken question, what do we chase, and what chases us? The wolves are always there, just beyond the edge of sight. And maybe that's the lesson, not to outrun them, but to live brightly enough that the darkness has to work for every inch it gains. The scholar's candle flickers wildly, though no wind stirs in the chamber, a warning, perhaps, as they lower their voice to a threadbare whisper. Not all creatures of Norse myth roar or slither. Some exist in the spaces between breaths, in the corner of your vision, when you stand alone in the deep woods at twilight. They are the Landvitir, the spirits of the land, and they do not forgive intrusion lightly. Picture a brook that suddenly stills its babbling as you approach. A grove where the birds fall silent mid-song, the sense that the moss beneath your boots isn't just damp, but listening. These spirits aren't gods or monsters. They're the soul of the earth itself, the pulse in the roots of ancient oaks, the sigh in the reeds of untouched marshes. The Norse knew them as protectors, but also as capricious forces. A farmer who felled a tree without offering a handful of grain might wake to withered crops. A hunter who took more than his share could find his footprints filling with icy water, no matter how far he ran. The Landvitir didn't punish with claws or fire. They simply withdrew, and a world stripped of their subtle blessings was a world turned hollow, like a harp missing half its strings. The scholar's fingers tremble as they recount the tale of a Viking crew who anchored on an uncharted shore, only to flee before dawn. What did they see? Nothing, that was the horror. The trees had no birds, the grass held no insects. The very air seemed to press against their skin, like a hand over a mouth. The land wasn't dead, it was waiting, watching, judging. Yet here's the truth that lingers like mist over a morning river. The Landvitir weren't cruel. They were particular. Leave an offering of honey at the base of a lightning-struck tree, and the next storm might spare your village. Speak your name aloud before crossing a certain glen, and the path would stay firm beneath your feet. The Norse didn't fear these spirits, they negotiated with them, a daily dance of respect and reciprocity. The fire dims suddenly, as if snuffed by an unseen breath. The scholar doesn't relight it. Some presences prefer the dark, and as the shadows thicken, pressing close like curious spectators, you realize you've felt this before. That prickle on your neck when you're the only soul for miles. The way the old oak in your grandparents' yard seemed to lean closer when you whispered secrets to it. The Landvitir never left. They just learned to whisper softer, in a language we've forgotten how to hear. But tonight, in this flickering darkness, the veil feels thin. And if you stay very, very still, you might catch the faintest echo of a question. Do you remember how to listen? The scholar's grip tightens on the parchment until the edges crackle like distant thunder. Or perhaps it is thunder, the first rolling growl of the doom they are about to describe. Their voice doesn't just tremble, it fractures, splitting like ice under the weight of the words they must speak. This isn't a story, it's a reckoning. Close your eyes. Let the fire's warmth vanish as the sky above you splits open, revealing not stars, but the gaping maw of Jörmungandr, the primordial void. The air reeks of burning metal and wet fur. Somewhere, Fenrir's howl shreds the horizon, Jörmungandr's coils churn the seas to poison, and Nidhogg's wings, yes, wings, for in this final hour, even the root hour takes flight, blot out the sun. The beasts aren't just rising, they're converging, drawn together by a hunger older than time, their paths etched into the world's bones long before the first god drew breath. The scholar's quill snaps as they scribe the names, ink splattering like blood. Skull swallows the sun, Hattie gorges on the moon. The great tree Yggdrasil shudders, its roots frayed to threads by Nidhogg's centuries of gnawing. The imagery isn't poetic, it's clinical, a dissection of apocalypse. Every beast, every omen, every whispered prophecy was never a warning, it was a countdown. And now the hour tolls. Listen, that's not the fire popping. It's the sound of Surtur's sword igniting, of Odin's spear splintering under Fenrir's jaws, of the Valkyries' steeds screaming as their wings catch flame mid-flight. The scholar's voice rises above the chaos, not in triumph, but in something far more haunting, a plea. Remember this. Remember the wolf's hunger, the serpent's patience, the dragon's spite. Remember that the world doesn't end because the beasts are monstrous. It ends because they were inevitable, and then silence. Not the absence of sound, but the kind of silence that comes after a scream, after a last breath, after the final page of a saga turns to ash in your hands. The scholar's candle gutters out, but in the dark, something stirs, not a beast, not a god, a whisper, so faint it might be memory. Again, because here's the secret the Norse carved into every myth. Ragnarok isn't an ending. It's a cycle. The wolves will loose the sun and moon from their bellies. The serpent's venom will rain into the sea, birthing new waters, and from the ashes of the world tree, a single sapling will push through the charred soil, its leaves trembling with the same stories, waiting for someone, maybe you, to listen. The scholar's voice softens, the candle sputtering as they close the tome. The beasts now sleep once more in the pages, but their legends linger, whispering in the shadows, waiting for the next curious soul to awaken them. The firelight dims to embers, casting the chamber into a twilight where myth and memory blur. You can almost hear it, the faint rustle of parchment settling, the creak of old leather as the cover seals shut, the sigh of something ancient slipping back into dreams. But here's the secret no saga ever wrote down. These stories don't truly end. They coil around your ribs like smoke, nestle in the hollow of your throat, hum in your blood with every heartbeat. Think of the way frost patterns bloom on a windowpane, how their delicate branches mirror Yggdrasil's roots, or how a storm's fury can sound, for one fleeting moment, like Fenrir's howl carried across centuries. The Norse didn't just tell tales, they embedded them into the world's bones, so that even now, when the night grows quiet and the wind stills, you might catch an echo of Jörmungandr's scales brushing the ocean floor, or the distant, rhythmic click of Nidhogg's teeth against the roots of your own subconscious. The scholar leans back, their face half lost in shadow. The lesson was never just about the beasts. It was about what they reveal, the parts of us that recognize them. That flinch at the wolf's howl, not because it's foreign, but because somewhere deep down we remember. The Draugr's grudges, Ratatoskr's mischief, Half-Gufa's patient hunger. They are mirrors, not monsters. And when the last candle gutters out, when the chamber fades to black, what's left isn't fear, it's kinship. So take these stories with you. Let them curl like ivy around the edges of your days. Because the next time you stand at the shore, watching the waves roll in, you'll know myths don't live in books. They live in the way you hesitate before stepping into the dark, in the shiver down your spine when the wind bites just so, in the unshakable sense that the world is older, wilder, and far more alive than it pretends to be. The tome is closed, but the telling, that never ends.